that absence turned out to be a little bit shorter than we were expecting when we did the award. And yeah, I think they're getting on with it. But she's made of incredibly strong stuff. I think that shone through from the moment she came into the public eye and then became absolutely unavoidable once she returned from Iran, after spending more time there than she would have done if Boris Johnson hadn't been a clown car, a walking disaster zone, an absolute picture of arrogance and absence of care and contrition, as he proved yesterday in his farewell speech. Thank you, Matthew. I'm always slightly amused by people who sound a little bit surprised to find themselves on the radio, but you acquitted yourself quite perfectly and reminded us of a very, very important point, and indeed one of the items on our list of the 50 worst things that Boris Johnson has done. Certainly, I think, for me at least, among the most serious. 11:30 is the time. Holly Harris is here with your headlines.
This is LBC with James O'Brien. Call 0345 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850.
It is half-time, 11:33. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where, I mean, according to the official list, we've only got up to number 4 or 5. Number 4, in fact, was when he endangered the British mum, Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe, who had been jailed in Iran, by essentially endorsing the Iranian regime's version of events and consigning Nazanin to more time in Iran than would otherwise have been the case. I'll run through a couple more. Remember, I mean, they're 50 here, so some you will find resonant and others perhaps less so. I think this is stone cold disgusting, although there are plenty of people still prepared to defend it. He called black people piccaninnies. He wrote in the Daily Telegraph, "It is said that the Queen has come to love the Commonwealth partly because it supplies her with regular cheering crowds of flag-waving piccaninnies." Now, I don't need to check. I'm sure he claimed later that it was a joke, or that it was not as serious as it came across, or that it was wholly satirical. Of course it's not, because he's attributing a story to the Queen. He's not just insulting every black person that's ever lived. He's insulting the Queen as well, because he's putting words into her mouth. She loves the Commonwealth because it supplies her with a regular cheering crowd of flag-waving piccaninnies, which means not only that she sees them in the same light that Boris Johnson is describing them, but also that he believes, or he is telling you, that that is the case. So, listen, if you are a massive racist and you haven't got a problem with that, then you should have a problem with the fact that he's also insulting the Queen. No? Spell not broken yet? And then, on a similar theme, of course, that occasion when he mocked Muslim women as letterboxes. Regardless of what you think about the face veil, there is a way to talk about things. He described them as oppressive and weird and bullying, and concluded that it's absolutely ridiculous that people should choose to go around looking like letterboxes. And then, staying with the racism, he used racist terms to describe Barack Obama, saying that it was a symbol of the part Kenyan president's ancestral dislike of the British Empire, of which Churchill had been such a fervent defender. I mean, it's just like prep school popinjay prattling. It really is. And he was getting paid £250,000 a year by the Telegraph to come out with guff like that, a figure that he later described, of course, as chicken feed. Speaking of large sums of money, he propagated the £350 million a week Brexit lie, of course, riding in that infamous bus emblazoned with Dominic Cummings's catastrophic calumny. Let's give our NHS the £350 million the EU takes every week. Wrong on every imaginable level. And I mean, for those who want to pretend that Brexit wasn't a largely racist project, then that would be the clincher for what got it over the line. That would be the winning card, as it were. And then, of course, the conflict of interest rules, which saw him break financial interest rules 3 times in less than a year. He also breached the ministerial code in August of 2018 by starting a £275,000 a year newspaper column just 3 days after quitting as Foreign Secretary. You're not supposed to do that. Of course, he is considerably more careless when it is other people's money that he is spaffing up the wall, because he spent 43 million quid of your money on a garden bridge project that didn't see a single brick being laid. £43 million of public money, more when private investment is included. But not a single brick was laid, not a single piece of ground was broken. 43 million quid. And on it goes. 11:37 is the time. Jason is in King's Cross. Jason, we're not going to get to the end of the list by 1 o'clock today, I don't think, but what are you most concerned is on it?
Hi, James. Thanks for doing this. Well, like a lot of your callers this morning, I'm kind of exhausted and feel quite ill with just the cumulative effect of the volume of horrors that have been inflicted on us over the past few years. But I would bring you back to my... to cast your mind back to the autumn of 2020, when he had been advised by his scientific advisors that we needed to lock down, or at least have a fire break. COVID was running rampant. He refused, and only under sufferance at the beginning of November, we went into that month lockdown, which by then was too late. And it was at that time that he made the "let the bodies pile high" comment. The callousness and lack of compassion and is so illustrative of the man. I've got personal skin in the game with that. My mother went into hospital for an unrelated operation at the beginning of December. It was rampant, as you know, infections up the scale. She acquired the infection in hospital and passed away on New Year's Day 2021. Thank you.
How do you feel? Sorry for interrupting you, but I would love to know how you feel when you hear them all, including the ones who've belatedly discovered a semblance or an impression of integrity this week. How do you feel when they talk about him getting all the big calls right and having seen us through COVID? Because I don't... Manifest
nonsense. It's not true.
It's beyond nonsense, though. It's much worse than that, isn't it? Nonsense is funny or comical.
Well, it's just part of the... It's a very significant big part, because that's what they keep going back to, don't they? It's just a line. It's a messaging point that... is top of the tree for the gaslighting and lies that we've been, sold. Of course he didn't. I mean, in his defence, am I even saying that sentence? But I appreciate, I'm always minded of Whitty saying through all this period, he says there's no good choices here, there's no good options.
Sure.
One thing, and, I get that, but the lack of seriousness from the beginning and throughout, and the fact that he would then, which we, a lot of people died unnecessarily, that's the bottom line.
Yes, I know.
And he prioritised just keeping things open, getting to proving...
There may not be any perfect choices. There are, Whitty's point really being that nothing's going to be something you'd embrace or welcome. But if you've missed the first 5 Cobra meetings, there's quite a strong case for arguing you're not even going to know what the choices are or what the choices were. I find that for me, and a lot of my correspondents do too, that this constant claim, and I hear it on the radio, I see it on the telly, this constant claim. I suppose it's a bit like gaslighting, isn't it? In that you can only challenge it so many times. Someone says it on the radio. Well, it's Kirsty Walk picking up Rees-Mogg on the lie about the vaccine rollout was so powerful the other night, because they just get used to it and it's so glib, and you just sort of think, well, if they're all doing it all the time, then the journalists that still have access to these politicians, they're not going to be able to do anything else. Can we just stop claiming that he got all the big calls right, please? So they just gloss over it and get to the next bit. But it's breathtaking, that particular lie. He got all the big calls right. He got us through COVID. What does that even mean? What country hasn't been got through COVID by hook or by crook? It's madness.
And it's not over. That's not over.
No, I know it's not. Long COVID is barely understood at this stage.
James, I have long COVID, which makes me not periodically very ill. I don't blame him for that, but I do hold him personally responsible for the death of my mother.
Gosh, well, I can't really respond to that with anything other than sympathy. I really can't. And of course, whether it is a fatal infection or whether it is one that led to long COVID, the simple arithmetic is that more clarity in leadership throughout that first 6 months, that first year, would have reduced the number of infections before the vaccinations got into our bloodstream. And the fewer infections you have, the fewer deaths you have, and the fewer cases of long COVID you have. Jason, I'm sorry, mate. Oh, boy. 11:42 is the time. Again, not really reading out many texts from idiots today, but we should represent all sides of the idiot spectrum. So here's Matthew saying, James, you voted for him when his Piccaninny statement was already known. What changed for you to vote for him? Call me. This is the sort of social media sniffing your own farts school of leftish politics. The point being, of course, that in 2008, when Boris Johnson stood for Mayor of London, very few people were experts on every word he'd ever written for The Spectator magazine. I certainly wasn't. He wasn't famous enough for it to have been amplified or broadcast or certainly in my case, as a showbiz journalist who just started blathering on the radio and the telly a bit. I just didn't know, mate. I mean, that's not controversial. It's not something I'm proud of, but you've got to stop thinking you've got these zingers in your locker when people tell you things that you only know about because they've told you. That means there's no shame attached to it or embarrassment. I tell you something and you go, ha, what about that thing you told me? That makes you a hypocrite. And do you see, Matthew? Do you? It's not hard, is it? Okay. Anyway, good luck. 11:43 is the time. Ed's in Tunbridge Wells. Ed, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi, James.
Hello,
Great to speak to you again.
Well,
a bit nervous, so bear with me.
Carry on.
So, I know you're going through this long list of awful
I'm trying
things
to. I'm still only up to 10, but people keep ringing me, Ed. People like you. I don't mind Jason, obviously. That was a much more serious call than some of the others. Carry on, Ed.
But, I mean, that's the thing. You think that there couldn't be anything worse or just as bad, and yet, nope, something else comes along. I mean, I've been reading the list of how much his flat cost and the things inside it. I mean, £500 on the tablecloth. £500!
I know.
I mean, what was it? Made out of some mythical creature that he caught and killed that we don't know about?
Unicorn hide, probably. A unicorn hide tablecloth. Yeah. What fascinates me, and this might be something Michael Fabricant can help us with, is they spent £7,000 on a rug.
Yeah, £4,000 on a lampshade as well.
£15,120 on a pair of sofas. Now, and of course they knocked up donors for the cash in the first place as well before getting busted on that, and then, quotes, forgetting, end quotes, that he'd knocked up a donor for a cash in the first place. I do find this remarkable. I'm never quite sure how big a deal it is, because it's not public money. But it's about priorities, isn't it? Because this would be around the time that they were resisting Marcus Rashford's calls for the hungriest children in the country to get at least one decent meal a day during lockdown, and they're looking at, what's a Leighton? Do you know a Leighton? A Leighton? A one-number long book. Let's put some shelves, little side tables, 2 little side tables at £1,500 each. A £2,000 card table. A large mirror for £3,000. You would have thought that I mean, crikey, who's the fairest of them all? Yeah, I know,
but for me, that says a lot about his character.
Of course it does.
How can someone ever understand the cost of living crisis when you've got on the opposite side, you've got security tags on cheese in supermarkets because people are that desperate, and he's got items like that in his home. I mean, if I could sum up his flat, and this probably sums up the person who he is as well, it's the wannabe king who tried turning his temporary home into a permanent palace.
It's very nicely put. I also appreciate the effort you put into putting that together before you came on air. I wish more people would. I just thought of it. I wish more people would do that. The problem I've got, just because I need to push back a little bit. I don't think you need to be too poor to buy cheese to imagine what it is like to be too poor to buy cheese. Do you see what I mean? But that's not what you're saying. It's perfectly possible, for example, for very, very wealthy people to have empathy. There are gradations of empathy and there are gradations of wealth. But to be in charge is the point, Ed. To be in power, to be making all of the decisions that will affect the people who can't afford to buy cheese, and then dropping £7,000 on a rug, that's what sticks in your craw.
It is, absolutely.
And I don't think Rishi Sunak would have done. If Rishi Sunak had done it for a start, it would be entirely his own money that he was spending. I'm not defending Rishi Sunak. I'm just pointing out the slight difference between, or even the relevant big difference between somebody who has contempt for the people he governs and someone who is at least conscious of their concerns and difficulties. 4 months' rent, someone tells me, they could have got for the price of a lampshade that Boris Johnson bought for a flat that, as Ed has just reminded us, was never going to be his permanent home anyway. I was quite pleased with the joke that I did earlier in the week about the wallpaper, which the total amount that they spent on wallpaper was, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get that figure. I mean, that was an astonishing amount of money. It was £840 a roll or something like that, wasn't it? To which I thought, rather wittily, I suggested they should have put it up with Velcro.
James O'Brien on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
It is 10 to 12 already. It is, of course, a very good day to bury brilliant news, so I should probably bring it to your attention that the Mail on Sunday have lost a massive legal battle with Prince Harry over a defamatory claim they made about him. The High Court has handed down its judgment today. A High Court judge has ruled today that the piece was indeed defamatory. Mr. Justice Nicklin was asked to determine the natural and ordinary meaning of the parts of the article in the claim and whether they were defamatory, and his conclusion was that they were. There'll be damages involved in that, I think. I think Rachel's gone home now. Rachel Venable's doing about 8 shifts in 3 days this week. Absolutely incredible. So I won't be dragging her back into the studio. Although I believe she's here now with the weather. I'm joking. She's not. I presume there'll be damages involved in that. So well done, everybody. Speaking of large sums of money, £300,000 was the figure that Boris Johnson wasted on water cannon that he wasn't allowed to use. I don't know if you followed this story. London Mayor, he paid £322,000 for 3 second-hand water cannon after the 2014 riots, but I think Theresa May, who was Home Secretary at the time, pointed out that they were not licensed for use in Britain. I think they ended up being scrapped. So again, when it's other people's money, a slightly different approach to the one that he takes when it is his own. We're now up to 11 on the list, although some of you would have done things that are probably going to appear on the list a little bit later. So we've managed to get through 11 in an hour and 50 minutes today. And all I wanted to do today, and I think after all I've done for you over the last few years, at least you could have done on that day before my holiday in this momentous of political weeks, you could have just let me do a Steve Allen-style show, uninterrupted, 10 till 1, me running through the list of 50 things, with an occasional aside to laugh at the Daily Mail and what have you. But no, you keep on ringing. You keep on ringing with your powerful and important points, don't you? Honestly. 11:52 is the time, and here's Louise in Glasgow with a powerful and important point. What would you like to say, Louise?
Hi, James.
Hello.
I'll be honest, this is my first time calling in for anything like this. I'm quite nervous. I apologise if it's not very eloquent in how I'm sort of describing it.
You're sounding brilliant so far.
I don't know if you know about the Where's the Interpreter campaign that happened during 2020 and kind of reached somewhat of a conclusion last year.
Go on.
So it's related to BSL, British Sign Language, which is, of course, one of the languages of the UK. And Boris Johnson, the government, repeatedly refused during briefings, even during the announcement when we all first went into lockdown. There was no interpreter.
I'm so ashamed to tell you that I missed this completely.
Yes, well,
I'm so
it's
sorry.
something worth looking into. I
will
think
do.
It was very, very...
On what grounds did they not do it? Because we had BSL interpreters at the State of London debate last week with Sadiq Khan, and there were 2 brilliant women on the stage who were doing it. So it's doable. They didn't know what we were going to say. You didn't need to know in advance. You don't need to know in advance.
Yep.
Go on.
So, I mean, so regarding the briefings, it was, I believe the excuse, because it was an excuse, was due to not being enough space in the briefing room. Which, I mean, you've seen Nicola Sturgeon's.
I have. She had them. So did Mark Drakeford. Drakeford had them as well, didn't he?
Exactly. Yep, he did. It was simply just Boris Johnson that didn't. So there was a big campaign, obviously, regarding this because there was a number of people without access to what was actually going on. Imagine that first lockdown video that came out, and there was no interpretation with it. That actually got taken to court last year. Again, I don't think it was well publicised. And the government lost. The campaign won. And it was found that they should have provided interpreters. I can't remember exactly the timeline, but just before or just after that was when they did the renovation for the new briefing room, which I don't know if you can remember how much that cost for that renovation.
Can you?
I want to say it was like, I don't know if it was 20 million or 200 million or something. So
well, there's quite a big difference between. So I was going to say 80, but I was hoping you were asking me as a rhetorical question, and then
it wasn't. I can't recall at the moment. But with all that money that they spent on it, still no interpreter. And the same with Dominic Cummings when he had his
2.6 million. 2.6 million.
2.6 million. There you go, and no space for an interpreter.
What's your interest in that, Louise?
I'm an interpreter myself.
Right. So you're across that. And there's no real logic to that, is there? There's no real rationale to it. And as you say, it meant that deaf people were denied immediate access to potentially life-saving information.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
So it was just something I wanted to bring onto your show.
Oh, I'm glad that you did, because I'm fairly confident for probably the same reasons that I'm afraid I missed that story completely at the time. I'm fairly confident it won't have made the list of the 50 worst gaffes, scandals and lies that Boris Johnson has inflicted upon our undeserving island. So thank you for that. It's an important one. I will, when I get back from my holidays, have another look into that. Although, of course, I guess the horse has now bolted, we hope. Andrew's in Coventry. Andrew, what made you pick up the phone?
Hi, James.
Hello.
I spoke to you, it must have been a couple of months ago, and I outlined I'd been a former civil servant and worked in business, and I said to you how critically dangerous the Johnson government was to our institutions.
Yes.
And
well, you must be feeling pretty silly now. He's proved you completely wrong, hasn't he?
Well, yeah, absolutely. It's a bit like the line in the Italian Job where I think I only told you to blow the bloody doors off. Well, he's driven the truck over the mountain. But I think what it's done in a very serious sense,
yes,
is to, and I say this not too lightly, is to render parliamentary government, or the model of government that we have, to be fairly redundant. And when I spoke to you previously, I said there needs to be a new constitutional settlement, something that actually ensures that we don't get here again, and we certainly don't go down the Trump route. So I think I'm looking positively on this now, because what he's done, rather unerringly, is to give us a new opportunity to have that settlement. So it's not about personalities. It's not about who leads the Conservative Party or the Labour Party. It's actually on point about how we're governed and the manner in which we comport government. So I think that with this opportunity now, and I'm hoping that one of the leaders, one of the parties, perhaps a speaker, can have a conference and take this up, to have a real look at that. And it's not arguing about the role of the Queen and the Constitution. It's actually thinking about the model of government. And what I mean specifically is drawing the country together again through the route of democracy. So I think that we can look at things like a new cabinet structure, which doesn't just reflect Westminster, which is pretty out of touch and out of line with lots of people and lots of areas, whether regionally in England or in Wales, Scotland or Northern Ireland. So let's have a new cabinet, for instance. Let's have the first ministers of Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland in the cabinet. Let's have a federalist approach to this, and let's use the opportunity of this dreadful, corrupt man, this liar. Let's use an opportunity to afford a new beginning. Because
as I hear you, no, and I recognise and respect your contributions, but as I think I said to you last time you rang in, it's as if it's a word I want. I suppose it's as if the house is on fire and the fire engines turn up, and we can't have a conversation about whether or not these are the best available fire engines at the moment. We've just got to get on with putting the fires out with the hoses and the appliances that we've got. But yeah, I mean, one thinks, and no one's mentioned it yet, the proroguing of Parliament, the unlawful proroguing of Parliament, the fact that our Constitution was not robust enough to resist the attentions of somebody as depraved and dissolute as Boris Johnson. Thank you, Andrew. Here's a powerful message, just coming from a pal of mine, actually, who says, the worst scandal for me is the example he set to his children. You want your children to look on you in awe and wonder as you teach them right and wrong as they grow. Boris Johnson's elder children must be trying to defend their father now with nothing but their love. At least now he may have some time to set a better example to his younger ones. More optimistic perhaps than I am, but he does get another go now with another family, and perhaps he can do a better job, beginning by not running around behind their mother's back, which he's done, of course, with the mother of many of his other children.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
round. It could be October before the Conservative Party chooses a new leader. Rishi Sunak is among the favourites to take over, but he's yet to officially declare his interest. These people in his constituency of Richmond in North Yorkshire have been telling LBC what they make of their MP becoming the next Prime Minister.
In this end of the country, with the levelling up and such like, I think he's got a lot of support, certainly public-wise in this area.
I think he's completely out of touch with real people. The non-dom status thing really rankled.
He's competent and sound performance as Chancellor. I think he's a really good candidate for it.
Boris Johnson has reportedly decided to move his wedding party from Chequers to a new location. Friends and family had been sent save the dates for the 30th of July. Downing Street denied reports the celebration was one of the reasons the Prime Minister wants to stay on at number 10 while a new Tory leader is chosen. Japan's former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has been shot dead while delivering a campaign speech in the west of the country. Doctors say they were unable to save the 67-year-old despite huge volumes of blood transfusions. Craig Mark is a professor of international studies at Kyoitsu Women's University in Tokyo.
Politicians often have very close contact with the public during campaigning, and the fact that he's announced that he's died, it's just a complete shock to the entire public.
A 41-year-old man has been arrested. A tram driver is set to stand trial over his alleged role in the Croydon crash that killed 7 passengers in 2016. Alfred Dorris has denied a charge of failing to take reasonable care at work under the Health and Safety at Work Act. 48-year-old who's from Beckenham will be released on bail until the start of his trial. Portugal's government has declared an 8-day state of alert for wildfires as the country prepares for a heat wave with temperatures as high as 43 Celsius. In 2017, wildfires in the country killed more than 100 people. The state of alert means that fireworks will be banned and the public will not be allowed access to forests at heightened risk. In the city, a short time ago, the FTSE 100 was trading up 6 points at 71.95. The pound buys $1.19 and €1.18. The weather, some cloud and outbreaks of patchy rain in western Scotland, but elsewhere will be fine, warm and bright through the afternoon. Temperatures reaching 28 Celsius. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Holly Harris.
Eat, sleep, truck, repeat. Eat, sleep, truck, repeat. Eat, sleep, truck, repeat.
Life on the road can become an unhealthy cycle. But with the Garmin diesel trucking ecosystem, you can help monitor your general health and feel confident on the road with a sat-nav, headset, smartwatch and more. Designed exclusively for lorry drivers.
Eat, sleep, Garmin, repeat.
Shop the diesel range on Garmin.com. Trucking simplified.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
It is 3 minutes after 12. We're up to 12 on the list of the 50 top 10 scandals, gaffes and lies told by Boris Johnson, although you've already augmented the list. Some of the stuff that I think wrongly hasn't made the news agenda enough, for example, the failure and then the resistance to the idea that there should have been British Sign Language interpreters at those COVID briefings. There were in Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales, for example, but something about Boris Johnson's administration meant that there wasn't, and others. I haven't got through the list yet, so I can't say for certain that any of these stories aren't on it, but the Mirror's list does now go a little bit domestic. It reminds us of that row in the flat that was recorded in June of 2019 when the current Mrs Johnson was heard to be shouting, "Get off me," and "Get out of my flat," followed by a loud scream and banging, followed by silence. More details of that. An element of privacy invasion there, but remember that Diane Abbot was painted as public enemy number 1 by the right-wing media after being photographed drinking a mojito on a train. And then, of course, it took years at number 13 for Boris Johnson to confirm how many children he had. I think the current figure is 7, but even that hasn't been completely confirmed. And at number 14 in the Daily Mirror, the phrase describing gay men as tank-topped bum boys, which again, I went to public school and I know how crass men like me are encouraged to be when it comes to discussing people who are different from us, whether it's women or gay men or people from ethnic minorities. We don't all accept the invitation to behave like complete idiots, I'm happy to tell you. But he also wrote, if gay marriage was okay, I saw no reason in principle why a union should not be consecrated between 3 men as well as 2 men, or indeed 3 men and a dog, which is funny, apparently, in some circles. You then had the comment about dead bodies in Libya, which, of course, presaged the one that he made about letting them pile high in Britain, but perhaps did give us a little bit of a clue as to what his attitude was to humanity in the face of epic peril, because he talked about how the Libyan city of Sirte had a bright future as soon as they could clear the dead bodies away. And sticking with foreign affairs, he got to Myanmar in 2017 and recited the opening verse to Rudyard Kipling's poem, The Road to Mandalay, which I think very diplomatically, if you pardon the pun, our ambassador there described as not appropriate and probably not a good idea. It's a sort of piece of Victoriana, imperial Victoriana, which could not be less appropriate in the context of a colonial era poem, in the context of a visit from a senior politician to a former colony. He was back in Britain when he went to a Sikh temple and boasted about whiskey, talking about whiskey exports to India. The Sikh faith, of course, forbids the consumption of alcohol, and it's not just religions that he manages to malign. He managed to insult the entire city of Liverpool in 2004 after accusing fans, well, first of all, blaming fans for Hillsborough, following in the despicable tradition of the disgraced former editor of The Sun, Kelvin Mackenzie, and accusing Liverpudlians of wallowing in victim status. He went a bit further when it came to Papua New Guinea, coming on from insulting an entire city to insulting an entire country, because he then apologised to them in 2006 for joking about their orgies of cannibalism. And I think the class point here is crucial. This stuff is funny round the dinner tables that he sits around, and I've sat around some of those dinner tables, so I know a little bit of what I speak, and some of it is, if not excusable, then at least explicable, and you don't really mean it, or you say it when you're young because you want to fit in with the people who are older, but if you're still doing it now, if you're doing it at 50, whatever he is, it means you're still stuck in psychological short trousers. You are a man-child, you are a toddler, despite the fact that you are Prime Minister, and that, of course, is at the root of so many of our problems. I'm glad that the caller who rang in to complain about the child abuse comments has got his scandal on the list. That comes in at number 21. And then on a much less serious note, in 1991 he wrote a story for the Daily Telegraph claiming that EU chiefs had rejected Italian demands for smaller condoms. That's a joke essentially, and a lie, although the Daily Telegraph published it as news, built upon casting aspersions upon the size of Italian penises. And we made him Prime Minister. Incredible, really. Phone lines are open. There are 2 lines free now for the first time since 10 o'clock. If you want one of them, you can grab it on 0345 6060973. Lee is in Frankfurt in Germany. Lee, what would you like to say? Hello, mate. What's on your mind?
Hope you enjoy your holiday. Seems well earned over the last 2 weeks.
Couldn't agree more. Absolutely. Should have had a whip round, really, so that people could buy me a drink at the airport. Carry on.
Or a free wedding venue in Chequers. I'm actually calling on behalf of our 11-year-old daughter, Elena, who's incredibly astute and smart, and I'm sure you know, having daughters, they tend to kind of reveal the truth to you.
Yes.
So we had to move our business post the Brexit non-services deal from the UK to Germany, and so I'm calling from Frankfurt. Obviously had to move the business, had to move the family, and we all shipped over to Frankfurt because there was no equivalence for services, right? In the UK, we have a management consulting and IT services business, which meant 90% of our clients in the EU couldn't work out the VAT rules.
So you had to bid goodbye to your business or bid goodbye to Britain. Thanks to Brexit.
Yeah, exactly.
Thanks to Boris Johnson.
Literally, right? Thanks to Boris. So sorry to be probably 1019 on the top 50 list.
Well, it's a very personal complaint, but you won't be alone, of course.
Yeah, well, there's millions of people that got affected by the no services deal, right? And they're all dealing with it over the last 3 or 4 years. But yeah, my daughter asked me this morning. She heard your advert for top 50. She just said, "Can you tell James that that's the man that made us move to Germany?"
Gosh, what's her name? If you don't mind, you don't have to tell me.
Elena. Yeah,
you said Elena. You said Elena. Thank you, Elena. I'm glad. I mean, I can give you a special spot. You can have your own chart, because that is sad. And I'm sure you're making a great fist of it in Germany, and there'll be loads of benefits, and you can retain your freedom of movement and what.
Yeah, and we got the German passports last year, and it's all good, right? So we can travel around the EU. We're not not going to be in the same passport queue as you're going to be next week.
Yeah,
so,
all right, don't rub it in. I'll be Irish by the end of the year.
Exactly. I just want to look. Lots of kids' opportunities have just been hammered by that no services deal and the trade deal. You can't travel, can't work.
And they're still offering it up as a win. So I asked earlier on a much more poignant note how our caller who lost his mum felt about the boasts that they somehow got all the big calls right during COVID. When you hear them boasting still about getting Brexit done, and you know what it means, how does that land with you and indeed with Elena?
Yeah, it's all rubbish, right? You've got thousands and thousands of people that are like, their life got turned upside down so this guy could get into number 10, right? Frankly, the sort of, the dismal kind of state of UK politics is summed up by the fact that he's never even mentioned it for 2 years,
right.
Brexit got done. It just got done very badly for millions and millions of people.
And of course, they want to continue. They want to keep telling us to stop talking about how awful it is while continuing to claim that it's all gone brilliantly. It is a sort of psychologically fascinating mindset into which some people who I have held respect for over the years, and in some cases still do, but they've fallen for it hook, line and sinker. It's bizarre to watch. Isn't it?
They just believe this rubbish, right? And they're sucked into this kind of cult status where nothing can be untrue, and then ultimately you get what we've just had, right? But then, there's no recognition of what he's actually done to the country, the economic prospects.
You get these little moments of Jacob Rees-Mogg saying, we can't possibly control our borders because it would cost too much money, so we won't be introducing any border checks after all. And you sit there thinking, is it me or is the man a complete lemon? Turns out he's a complete lemon.
Yeah, he's a lemon. Right, it's very simple.
Thank you, Lee, and love to Elena. As you say, a very astute young lady, clearly, but one who I'm certain will make a great success of living in Germany, albeit that they have moved there somewhat reluctantly. Staying with matters colonial, he said Africa needs its old colonial powers to come back. This is quite significant, actually. He wrote this in 2002, and the kind of people who profess to care more about statues than they do about hungry school children. And you wonder what they're on. Frankly, you wonder what's wrong with them. How can you be fetishizing statues and almost sort of singing jolly songs about slavery or whatever it is that explains this bizarre, thin-skinned, chicken-licking cowardice that comes into play whenever some idiot tells you that British values are under attack. This might be part of it, because Johnson argued with a straight face in The Spectator that Africa is a mess with too many people dying, and that they should bring back colonial powers and cancel the guilt trip. So perhaps some sort of weird nostalgia for the days when... Well, I guess he's brought back transporting people around the world against their will as part of a financial arrangement, haven't they? Which is a description which, of course, fits slavery. But Priti Patel's Rwandan refugee scheme could also be described as transporting people halfway around the world against their will as part of a financial arrangement. So maybe it's not that pie in the sky, after all, to link the two together. 12:13 is the time, and we're only up to 20. I'm going to have to speed it up a little bit, or you're going to have to stop calling me. I don't think the second bit's going to happen. Ryan in Durham is proof of that. Ryan, what would you like to say?
I just want to say that I think the worst thing that he's done of all of it is that for all the talk he said about getting on with the job, getting the job done, making the big calls, he just hasn't.
He never does anything.
He's just shirked his duty, his responsibility of the office. It's just, he hasn't done it. He's promoted sycophants and ideologues to not govern. Getting on with the job for him has been renovating his flat, and we desperately need competent governance.
Clarity and leadership. You make a really good point, because all of the things he boasts about actually have nothing to do with him. So even when they're not true, even when it's a lie that he tries to boast about, there will be no checks on goods going from Great Britain to Northern Ireland or Northern Ireland to Great Britain, even the bits that are sort of semi-true. I mean, he's wrong about that, about jobs, saying there's more people in work now than before the pandemic began. People complained about that loads of times. But even if it was true, which it isn't, it wouldn't have been a result of any policies or anything he could point to. If you said to him, all right, why are there more jobs now than before the pandemic began? If you let him off the lie and pretended it was true and said, what policy is it that has created this situation, which isn't true anyway, but let's pretend that it is just for the purposes of this ridiculous conversation, he wouldn't have anything to point at. He'd just say something about getting all the big decisions right and getting on with the job. The man's a menace. Absolute menace.
I mean, he prorogued Parliament. You mentioned it.
Yes.
He prorogued Parliament rather than competently governing the country and getting us through whatever Brexit we could have had. He just illegally prorogued Parliament because he's not doing his job. He hasn't done it for 3 years.
That's the mad bit about all these people coming out now, claiming they've discovered a moral compass, and they've not just been defending him for 3 years, they've been cheerleading for him. They've been waving their pom-poms around like it was going out of fashion.
I mean, my wife is a US national, and I've been telling anyone who would listen from before he even set foot in Prime Minister, as a Prime Minister, is that just look at the States, look at what happens when you have a head of government who doesn't know and doesn't want to do the job, who doesn't know how or doesn't know how to do it responsibly. And I've been telling anyone who would listen, like, no, he's get on with the job, he's going to get Brexit done. And it's like, no, he's not. He's just not.
But it doesn't even mean anything, does it? Getting Brexit done. It's a bit like saying I've got the arson done or something like that, or at least I promised to get I burnt the house down, I've done it now. Anyway, you can't take that away from him. He's burnt the house down. Turns out he hasn't even burnt the house down. He's just singed the carpets a bit, and they're going to have to change international law in order to actually torch the bloody place. But that's supposed to be an achievement. I'm supposed to be calming down and going on holiday in 45 minutes, Ryan. For heaven's sake. That's all right.
He's done this for an entry on his CV. That's what this feels like, and it felt like that from the moment. I mean, from anyone who knew him from before, when he was the mayor, all the way through his life, should have been like, this guy is not good for the country. He's not going to be a good Prime Minister.
Which there they are. And Nadine Dorries is still waving her pom-poms around, which frankly nobody wants to see. 12:16 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. 12:18 is the time. Where are we? We're up to about the 20 mark, I think, maybe just past it. The likelihood of getting to 50 is diminishing by the minute because you keep ringing me, which frankly is just downright disrespectful, frankly, never mind disobedient. The list of the 50 scandals, gaffes and lies, it's not even close to comprehensive, is it? I think we've discovered that already, although some of the things you've already rung in with have turned up a little bit further down the list. There's going to be stuff on the list that we wouldn't have put there if we were making up the top 50. I'm not particularly troubled by his rude comment about the size of Italian penises, for example, but I am troubled by the resistance to the idea that sign language interpreters, BSL interpreters, should have been at the COVID briefings. Sticking with low-level xenophobia, he enraged Italy with a threat about Prosecco in 2016, saying we drink more Italian wine than any other country in Europe, and suggested that if we didn't get the Brexit deal we wanted, we'd all refuse to drink Prosecco. He used a rude word to describe the French in 2019, claiming that they had shafted Britain over Brexit, although, of course, it wasn't their idea that we do it, or indeed that we put a border in the Irish Sea. He's compared the EU to Hitler. This was when claiming that they both wanted a united Europe, which is actually a portrayal of Winston Churchill's legacy as well, because he did want a United States of Europe, albeit one that would be achieved peacefully and through negotiation, whereas Hitler, of course, was going to do it through concentration camps and jackboots. But Johnson knows that, and he knows exactly who he's appealing to when he makes these comments, and he is probably still appealing to them now. You've got the infamous occasion when he commented F business over Brexit at a reception to mark the Queen's birthday, insulting the Queen once again, of course, by being so potty-mouthed at her celebration, and also insulting all the business people in the country who, as a much earlier caller reminded us, would once have thought that the Conservatives were at least perhaps on their side. He also allegedly said, and this is according to one of the most ridiculous people I've ever encountered in my professional career, so I take it with a pinch of salt, but it's on the Daily Mirror's list. Brian Coleman, who was chair of the London Fire and Emergency Planning Authority, claimed that Boris Johnson once erupted in fury while discussing the July the 7th bombings and stated, F the families, F the families. You know, that one had slipped off my radar, would you believe? And he once called Hillary Clinton a sadistic mental health nurse, which I'm just running out of words to describe how offensive he is. If you don't care about Hillary Clinton because you're a patriot, you should perhaps care about Sir Kim Darroch, who was our ambassador in the United States, and essentially he got turned over, didn't he, in the British media, and Boris Johnson refused to back him, refused to support him, which is the last thing a leader should do with their diplomats. And then there was that 20,000 flight £20,000 flight, taxpayers' cash, to take him to Kabul so that he wouldn't be in the House of Commons for a vote on expanding Heathrow Airport after he told his constituents in Uxbridge that he would lie down in front of the bulldozers rather than allow the expansion of Heathrow Airport. 21 minutes after 12. I don't know if I'm going to make it to 1 o'clock today. I think my voice might go. Catherine's in Highbury. Catherine, what would you like to say?
Well, hopefully this one will calm you down a bit, because it's not meant to be particularly serious, but it is also pretty revolting.
Yes.
Do you remember he bought some dodgy second-hand water cannons?
You've already done that one. Well, I've got these.
Have we done it?
Yeah, no, that's fine. It's not your job to keep track of these things. It's not mine either. It's not mine either. But I think the phones, despite my best efforts, are ringing so furiously that some of the people answering the phones aren't able to listen to the comments that are actually being made on air. Remind us of that story for anyone who's forgotten it in the last 10 minutes.
It was when he was London Mayor, and I'm pretty sure Theresa May was Home Secretary at the time.
Yes.
And he spent, I don't know how much it was, £500,000 or something?
£320,000 off the top of my head.
Okay.
That's all right.
Best part of £500,000.
Yeah.
On these second-hand water cannons from the Germans, I think. And, of course, they've never been used, because I don't think we allow use of water cannons in protest.
They were never licensed.
But I have an idea for what we could do with them.
Yes.
Because, he said that it would take... Well,
go on.
What? Because they've been scrapped. No, we can make a use for them. He said that it would take flamethrowers to get him out of 10 Downing Street.
I didn't, but I believe you. Get the water cannon to flush him out.
Exactly. You get the wallpaper off at the same time.
What happens to all that gear? What happens to all that gear? Because I mean, there's some mystery over where he's going to live. He's rented out. I think he got the house in the Cotswolds as part of the divorce settlement with his last wife. The current wife has a relatively small flat in Wandsworth, which, for someone of their tastes, is unlikely to feel appropriate for a family with two small children. Where are they going to live, and where are they going to put all these 10 grand lampshades in the meantime?
I imagine that Carrie will be getting the kettle out and steaming the wallpaper off.
You'd think so at that price, wouldn't you? Does that work? I don't know. I need to ask Gary, my mate in the trade.
I'm not much of one for DIY, but you could sweep out wash out the stench of corruption at the same time.
I'm not so sure you could. I think it lingers. The memory kind of lingers. There'll be a big yellow storage unit somewhere in London soon that's got all these sort of 10 grand side tables in them and 7 grand rugs. Even Michael Fabricant, I'm going to keep doing this joke until people get it. Even Michael Fabricant doesn't spend 7 grand on a rug. Thank you, Catherine. Liz is in Durham. Liz, what would you like to say?
Well, I'm talking about Carrie and Boris and acts of unkindness.
Okay.
And I was just so sad that they dragged the Catholic Church into their sleeves by
how did they do that?
Having their marriages, his previous marriages, annulled. And in The Guardian, it showed his wedding certificate, which said previous marriages annulled, which rendered all of his lovely other children illegitimate overnight.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
If the marriage wasn't... So they got married in a Catholic church, which you can't do unless your marriage has been annulled. And if your marriage has been annulled, then the marriage didn't count, which means that... Well, I mean, I don't really care about illegitimacy and things like that anymore. But the point is, some people do, and they might.
But it was such an unkind, awful thing to do to his previous wives and children.
Because he could have just got married in an Anglican church, where they let you get away with any old shenanigans.
Obviously, whatever they want, they get. and which, who paid the money to the Vatican and how many people were involved in getting the marriages annulled. It was done very quickly.
Yes.
And it was just an act of such awful unkindness by both of them.
I'm not completely across that story, but I remember the marriage occurring, and I remember the fact that it took place at Westminster Cathedral, which means that given he's been divorced twice, my godmother couldn't get married in church, and she wasn't divorced. She was just marrying a man who was, but the local Catholic priest wouldn't let them get married in church 50 years ago. I don't know. Are you sure that the annulments took place? I think there was just a presumption that they must have done.
Well, the marriage certificate had marital status, previous marriages annulled.
Did it really? Well, you're a bit of a Sherlock Holmes, aren't you?
Well, I remember reading it and thinking so sadly that how could any parent be so cruel to their children?
As to say that the marriage doesn't really count, which is kind of what the technical impact of annulment would be. Thank you, Liz. I didn't see that one coming, but then again, you know, as we suggested at the top of the show, confining ourselves to 50 was both ridiculous and absurdly optimistic, and we've only got up to 30. So, I mean, one of the theories knocking about at the time was that the original marriages, both of them, probably lacked what we call canonical form, which means they wouldn't have been recognised in Catholic law, so he may not have needed an annulment. But if you say it says that on the certificate, then... I say 26 after 12 is the time. A couple of phone lines free. Still 20 more to get through, plus whatever ones aren't on the list. I'm pretty sure Liz's one won't be on the list. The debasement of the Catholic Church itself, although, of course, they're happy to attack the Church of England when the Church of England point out the despicable nature of the Rwanda refugee problem. 03456060973 is the number that I've run out of energy now. I can't keep up the pretense that I don't actually want you to ring in. I would have been all right if you'd let me have the whole 3 hours to go through this list with a few little riffs, jazz-style riffs, coming off the back of the stories. But my God, it's like climbing Mount Everest trying to get on top of the scale of Boris Johnson's corruption, lies, scandals, and gaffes. Rob's in Maidstone. Rob, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello,
We've
Rob.
spoken before about mental health and the money stuff.
Yes, and that's going to be your thing then.
Oh, this is a huge one.
Yeah.
So he stood up and supported the Chancellor when they said they couldn't help people on legacy benefits during the pandemic because the computer system wouldn't do it. And they've just proved they lied because next week they're paying out stuff to people on legacy benefits for the cost of living crisis.
Is that right?
So they allowed 600,000 people to not get help during the pandemic.
Why? And again, this is your field of expertise, not mine, so just let me play catch-up briefly. So the reason they couldn't do this during COVID was because they didn't have the bureaucracy, but they've somehow miraculously found the bureaucracy to do it in response to the cost of living crisis.
What they said in Parliament was they couldn't do it because the computer systems were archaic.
Right.
What they said in court was it was because it was against fiscal and social policy.
Got you. Okay. Wow.
And
they really
now
are shapeshifters, aren't they? And this is Sunak more than Johnson, presumably.
No, because Johnson was questioned on Sky News about it.
Right.
And said they would love to have been able to help, but it really was impossible.
I see.
And now they've just, in this latest thing around stuff, and they've also, the other thing they've done is they've gone on and on about the Warm Homes discount for the help with bills without telling people that ends this year.
Is that right?
Yeah. So if you go on the website now and try and register for the coming year, it'll tell you that it's ended.
Good grief. And what's replacing it? Anything?
Nothing. That's why Sunak said about the extra £150 going to people.
Yeah.
And the disabled charity said, well, that just makes up for what they're losing.
Okay.
It's because, and they said that would have helped 6 to 8 million people who were going to be hit by this cost of living crisis. So it's all well and good, all of his abhorrent behaviour, but it's not just him.
No, it's not. And for people who aren't au fait with the terminology, when you say legacy benefits, Rob, who are we talking about?
We're talking about people on disability living allowance. We're talking about people with personal independence payments. We're talking about people with ESA. So people with long-term chronic health issues.
Thank you, mate. I mean, that's a tough one. Again, I bet we're up to 32. I bet that one doesn't even make the list because it's impossible to pin down the sheer scale of the effrontery and the callousness and the casual cruelty that many people, of course, still insist they love and relish. I don't think you do, to be honest. Maybe I'm being unduly kind, but I don't really think you like this stuff. I think you're either completely unaware of it or your head is so far up your backside that you can't even hear the birds sing anymore. It's 12:30. Amelia Cox is here with the headlines.
Delicious.
This is LBC with James O'Brien. Call 0345 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850.
It is 12:32. One objection to the last caller and the comments about the warm home discount, saying it has not ended. Applications will open later this year. Please read this out. I need to double or triple check that. I apologise. This is the nature of live radio, as indeed is breaking news. And we're hearing now that the Durham police are about to report back on Keir Starmer's situation. So any minute now we're going to find out what that has. Sorry, someone's telling me in my ear, but I couldn't work out whether they were saying they've been fined or not been fined. It's Shivani and Mikey who are working with me today, which is an amazing podium to step onto, isn't it, given the nature of news, with Theo Usherwood, Paulie and Ben Kentish on holiday, and my regular producer also had annual leave booked. So, I mean, I just didn't want to trust what I heard in my ear, because I thought did they say they've been fined or not been fined? And now I'm building up suspense because you're still not quite sure. Don't shout so loudly in my ear, otherwise people will pick it up on the microphone. They have not been fined. Keir Starmer and Angela Rayner have not been fined, although I imagine that will probably not stop the Daily Mail from putting it on their front page tomorrow. And to be fair, whatever they put on their front page tomorrow, if they put a photograph of a festering dog poo on their front page tomorrow, it would be an improvement on today's front page. Should we drag Rachel Venables back to work after this announcement again? She could come in and do the financial news, an update on Wimbledon, she can do the weather, she can do the stock market, and then she can talk to us about the fact that it has been reported that Durham police do not believe that there is a case to answer for the leader of the Labour Party. Right, come here a minute. Keir Starmer was Director of Public Prosecutions. We've talked a lot about the Daily Mail today, and we're going to talk about it a little bit more. Keir Starmer was Director of Public Prosecutions, right? One of the most senior lawyers in the country. His job was to pick over the fine detail and determine where criminality lay and didn't lie, what cases were pursuable and what cases were not. I was pretty confident that there was no earthly way, because he's not a cynical politician, there was no earthly way that he was going to make that pledge to resign in the event of being fined unless he had brought every single one of his loyally every single element of his loyally expertise to bear upon the question. He would have gone through it with a fine-tooth comb. He would have done precisely the opposite of what Boris Johnson would have done in similar circumstances, and he would have dug into the detail and read through the rubric and established the law in a forensic and professorial way. And then he would have concluded that he had absolutely nothing to lose, or indeed even risk, by saying, look, if I'm found to be guilty of that which Boris Johnson is guilty of, then I will actually resign. And he was right. Here's the full statement. Following the emergence of significant new information, an investigation was launched by Durham Constabulary into a gathering at the Miners' Hall in Red Hills, Durham on the 30th of April 2021. That investigation has now concluded. A substantial amount of documentary and witness evidence was obtained, which identified the 17 participants and their activities during that gathering. Following the application of the evidential full code test, it has been concluded that there is no case to answer for a contravention of the regulations due to the application of an exception, namely reasonably necessary work. Accordingly, Durham Constabulary will not be issuing any fixed penalty notices in respect of the gathering, and no further action will be taken. The investigation has been thorough, detailed and proportionate. The final evidence supplied by participants from the local constituency was returned to Durham Police on the 5th of July and analysed by investigators against all the evidence before the investigation was concluded on the 8th of July 2022. In line with the established national policing guidelines, we will not name or otherwise identify any of those present at the gathering, all of whom have been informed of the investigation outcome by their legal representatives. So if you are just joining us, Keir Starmer will not be fined for breaching lockdown rules because Keir Starmer did not breach lockdown rules. Meanwhile, the running total of people who did breach lockdown rules or fixed penalty notices issued to people working in Downing Street while they wrote the actual laws is it around the 120 mark? Has anyone got the number in front of them? How many fixed notices at Downing Street? It is. No one's shouting in my ear now, are you? Where's all the information I'm looking for now? How many fixed penalties have gone to Downing Street? And I'll take a moment to talk again about the Daily Mail, because this was one of the most disgusting episodes in British journalism that you will ever witness. They tried to persuade you, 126, there we go. 126 fifth penalty notices in Downing Street alone. They tried to persuade you that you didn't care about the fact that they were having parties. And this was entirely, I know I obsess a bit about the Mail, but this is all on their door. Absolutely all of it is down to them. They tried to persuade you that you didn't care about the fact that they were having lots of parties in Downing Street while you were not able to attend funerals or visit family or even pick up your new grandchild. They tried to tell you that. And because they've succeeded in the past at telling you, for example, that being in the European Union isn't a very good idea, or that Boris Johnson would make a brilliant Prime Minister, they presumed you'd believe them. They backed themselves to sell you that lie, just as they have sold you lie after lie after lie in recent years. But you didn't buy it. You were not having it. You decided, actually, you know what? It's outrageous. It's disgusting. It's not fluff, Jacob Rees-Mogg, to be concerned about this. He wasn't ambushed by cake, you ridiculous people. It was gross that you were throwing parties like they were going out of fashion while the rest of us couldn't even visit our mums. It was absolutely disgusting. And the Daily Mail tried to persuade you that it wasn't. They even tried to tell you at one point that you'd moved on from this and that you didn't really care anymore. And then they wheel out the ludicrous mewling pencil himself to describe it as fluff and claim that you don't care. And then all the client journalists and the forelock-tugging, cap-doffing cowards to talk about how the public has moved on and he was ambushed by cake and it didn't really matter. But guess what? It didn't work. So here's what they did, and this is really important. If you give a fig about the relationship between British journalism, British politics and the British people, if you give even a slither, a slice of fig, they just decided to gaslight you. And not just you, they decided to gaslight the police as well. So they just kept putting it on the front page. So it begins usually, this sort of thing, with a tweet or an article by that ludicrous Guy Fawkes-themed website, which is, well, essentially is to journalism what icebergs are to the Titanic. And so they would have done something with it. It had been published in The Sun about 9 months ago. But they're looking around. They say, what the hell can we do? This party business looks like it might get Johnson. And then I'll never get my seat in the House of Lords or my knighthood. What can we do? What are we going to do? It hasn't worked, boss. We've tried to tell people that they don't care about the fact that Boris Johnson was throwing parties like they were going out of fashion when they couldn't even attend funerals of their own family members. They're not buying it, boss. What are we going to do? Right, well, what are we going to do? Okay, so they're not doing that. We've tried the fluff test. Rees-Mogg's failed again. Okay, we're going to have to go for they're all as bad as each other. But that involves admitting that Boris Johnson is awful. Yeah, but it doesn't matter, does it, if we can also somehow portray Keir Starmer as being equally awful? So, well, we can't, really. He's not. Yeah, but if you tell them often enough, if you hit them over the head with it, it's going to pop up on all the paper reviews on the telly. It's going to be talked about on the radio shows. Even O'Brien will have to talk about it if we stick it on the front page for 4 or 5 days straight. They're going to be... we're going to make it matter even though it doesn't. And who knows? Maybe the police will have a fit of the vapours or a rush of blood to the head and actually find him guilty. We know it doesn't matter. We know that Keir Starmer is not even accused with this pathetic little picture that was taken illegally from someone trespassing on land they weren't supposed to be on. We know it's a non-story. If it was a story, it would have floated when it was first published last year. But our contempt for the British public, as editors of the Daily Mail, our contempt for the British public is so complete and so immense that we're going to gaslight them with this as well. And it won't work if we only put it on one front page. It won't work if we only put it on 2 front pages. It won't even work if we stick it on 5 front pages, because they're not that stupid, they're not that gullible, they're not that credulous. So here's what we're going to do, lads. We're going to stick it on the front page of the best-selling newspaper in the country for 2 straight weeks. And we're going to carry on doing it until they buckle, until reality is bent to our own diabolical designs, which involve, at this point in British history, one thing and one thing only: protecting the most corrupt Prime Minister we have ever had or will ever have. So they did it. They stuck it there for 2 straight weeks. And finally, Durham Police said, we're investigating, and people like Boris Johnson could stand up in the House of Commons and say, incredible. And all the little client journalists running around adding to the idea that they're all as bad as each other, or that Starmer has a case. What about Keir Starmer Currygate beer face curry Keir something. It's the contempt in which they hold you that gets me out of bed every day. It's the contempt in which they hold you that gets me angry, gets me upset, gets my patriotic heart skipping a beat. Because they hate you. They think you're so stupid that you won't see through a desperate, despicable, pathetic attempt to portray Keir Starmer as being even in the same universe of corruption and law-breaking as Boris Johnson. And that's backfired as well. What a day for the Daily Mail. What a day for Paul Dacre and Ted Verity and David Dillon, eh? And Jonathan Harmsworth, who bankrolls the whole shebang. What a day. You've been punched in court by Prince Harry. Your man has been chased out of Downing Street with his despicable overused tail between his ridiculous pink legs. And now your attempt to get Keir Starmer on the same sort of hook that Johnson has been swinging on for months has failed completely and miserably. But people like me don't get champagne corks out, because normal service will be resumed tomorrow morning or on Monday morning. And, of course, the cabal will just kick back again and the corruption will continue, and they'll be back to persuading you to vote against your own interests, to put disgusting adulterers who wouldn't know the truth if it slapped them round the face with a wet fish smack in the middle of Downing Street. And why? They can't even tell you. Why do you want Boris Johnson to be Prime Minister? Something, foreigners, Brexit, something. They can't even tell you. They don't even know. They don't think that far down the road. Everything is a football game. Everything is a battle, is a fight, is a meaningless gladiatorial combat. And my God, to see that one fail so miserably has brought me a modicum of joy in this otherwise dismal week. Keir Starmer and Angela Rayner have always been clear that no rules were broken in Durham. The police have completed their investigation and have agreed, saying that there is no case to answer. Keir Starmer will be making a statement this afternoon and will take questions from the media. What a day. Prince Harry defamed in court today to find out the Mail on Sunday defamed him. Why? Clicks and giggles. Boris Johnson, finally hoisted by the petard of his own epic corruption. 50 things one newspaper's put together. We could probably double it if it wasn't for the fact that Sheila Fogarty is expecting to start work in 15 minutes, quite correctly. We could easily double it. We could double it with our eyes shut. And now that pathetic attempt, that single most obnoxious episode in the recent history of the British press, and by God, there's a lot of competition, that attempt to corral the Durham constabulary, to persuade the British public, to corrupt the public space by propagating the lie that Keir Starmer had done anything remotely comparable to what Boris Johnson and 125 other people in Downing Street had done when they partied as we mourned or observed lockdown or endured enforced separation from our loved ones. Tony Benn. You never win. You never, ever win. You just got to keep pushing. Because if you don't push back against these people and these papers and these politicians, this week you just got a little glimpse of what would happen.
Leading Britain's conversation, LBC, with James O'Brien.
12:49 is the time, and that surely is that, right, for this week? We'll never have another week like this together. We'll be doing parking tickets and cycle lanes when I get back from my holidays in a couple of weeks. Although there is a wonderful array of political talent standing in for me in the first week, so from both sides of the House of Commons. So do feel free to pick their brains and benefit from the fruits of their political experience. But I think, like me, you probably have a bit of a need for some light relief. You want to step away from the political fray. I know that on Wednesday of this week, spending an hour with the magnificent Miriam Margolyes was something I hadn't realised that I needed so much. I mean, not only is she magnificent company and a beautiful, beautiful person, but it was also an hour in which I didn't think of Boris Johnson once. I think we'd all be grateful for an opportunity not to think of Boris Johnson once this weekend for at least an hour. So I'm delighted to tell you that you can spend an hour with Miriam Margolyes too, although that annoying bloke off the radio will be chipping in as well every now and then. And it's to mark the paperback publication of her incredible autobiography. And I've got to tell you, it is filthy, as you'd probably expect. The interview isn't. The interview was was lovely, really. And I hope you find, as I hope I did, that we got to the heart of Miriam a bit, in a way. And not some of the incredibly hair-raising and eyebrow-raising stories that appear in the paperback, which is called This Much Is True. She's just brilliant. An amazing life, an amazing career, an amazing actress, an amazing woman. And I loved spending time with her. You probably, the kids will know her as Professor Sprout from the Harry Potter films. You might have seen her in Beckett. Or you might, of course, have seen her famous one-woman show in which she ran through almost the entire canon of female characters created by Charles Dickens. The woman's magnificent, and I can't remember enjoying an hour spent in someone's company in quite the same way as I enjoyed this one, because it was such a light relief from the events of this week. So here's a little taster.
I think it's hard for me to realise that now I'm 81, which is old.
Yes.
And I can't quite take in what I've done in my life. Where has my life gone? What did I do with it? And I've only got a BA degree in English literature. I would have liked to have done more, learnt more.
Really?
Worked harder intellectually. But that wasn't the way it went.
Less living, more learning?
Yes, I would have loved that.
It's a contemplative perspective.
Yes, I think there is a slightly melancholic, contemplative longing within me.
When did you realise you weren't a scholar then? Because Oxford High School is a very august institution, and you waltzed into Cambridge. I mean...
Well, I didn't waltz into Cambridge.
Did you not?
I did get an exhibition to Cambridge,
yes.
Which surprised me.
Right.
But I think words thrill me, and always have.
Yes.
And that has been my salvation.
You've described your vocabulary. I can't remember how you described it, but it is... You don't overuse... You know lots and lots of words, and you never overuse any of them.
I love words.
I do too.
Words are the currency of thought.
Yes.
And I enjoy discovering words and using them in a different way. I love puns. I'm great friends with Esther Ranson.
Yes.
And she's a great punster. And we have fun doing that. It's just salty. It's tasty.
There's a theory as well that rage, people with small vocabularies who can't articulate, are a lot more given to rage and anger and stress because they can't get their feelings out of their head, and so they sort of form a constipation that then explodes. You know, so
I can believe that.
I can as well. Makes sense. You mentioned Esther Ranson. You've got a lot of friends. I read 12,000 names or thereabouts in your phone.
Yes, that's a bit boastful, isn't it?
I don't know.
Because, well, names aren't necessarily friends.
No, but a significant number of them will be.
I can't let people go.
Right.
I guarantee that when we finish this, I will want to claim you.
Well, feel free.
I will want to know you.
Feel free.
And in fact, I wanted to know you before I knew I was ever going to come on your programme.
Thank you.
Because of the way that you care about the same things that I care about.
I think so. I hope so. I take that as a compliment.
I believe it.
Good.
And so don't be surprised if I get your email from somebody.
I don't, you don't need to. You can get it off me. I'm blushing. I didn't know they'd chosen that bit. I don't have anything to do with that selection. But if you can tell she's just lovely. Absolutely lovely. And she's done so much. So much. 12:54 is the time. I've got to get over the line now. I mean, what a week. It's just insane, right? Absolutely insane. And on we go. I think we'll just add a couple more points to our list of disgusting things that Boris Johnson has done, and with that subtitle now of so many disgusting things that a lot of them weren't even in the Daily Mirror's list of the top 50 disgusting things Boris Johnson had done. Dave's in Market Drayton. Dave, what have you got?
Hi, James. I'm still quietly seething that there was a plane on the tarmac at Kabul airport and it got filled with dogs. I'm a dog lover.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong.
Sure.
But to fly dogs back as a priority over a significant number of people that were left behind, people that had worked for us, their families, some of which almost certainly aren't alive anymore.
Yeah.
I was extremely upset about that, and every breath that guy took upset me.
Yeah.
So that one particularly just sticks in my throat.
It was still denied as well. It was a very Johnsonian story, that, wasn't it? Because it appeared that the facts had been established, but because they just continued to deny it, and I think to even denigrate some of the people that had confirmed the facts, that it created enough confusion in the minds of the British public to see it disappear over the horizon, like so many of the other scandals and stories.
I think the lady who booked the flight said it came from the boss.
That's correct, yeah. And I think the clever money at the time was on him acting very much under the influence of his current wife. But again,
correct,
again, it gets subsumed in the swamp of even more serious... I mean, if you can have an even more serious scandal than the possible death of humans in consequence of the rescue of animals. It's I mean, what's today been like for you then, Dave, listening to this programme? Because it started off quite funny. I was going off on slight tangents and being all... Well, I thought it was funny. No one else probably did. That's the story of my life. But the longer it's gone on, the more I felt the weight of the seriousness of these scandals pressing down on me.
Yeah, I think elation yesterday,
a bit,
and then sober realisation of what that elation cost.
And how long it may take to undo. How long? I mean, in some cases, it will never be undone. If the worst-case scenarios you've just described could possibly be undone, we'd sign up for that in a heartbeat. But, of course, they can't be. They can't. Thank you, mate. Take care. Have a lovely weekend. It's coming up to 12:57. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. A lot of love coming in. Do you know what a flipping wally I am? There's a lot of love coming in already for the Miriam Margolyes podcast, which means you've been listening to it while I've been on the radio, which even though you're sending me kind words and compliments, I'm slightly affronted by the fact that you've been listening to the Miriam Margolyes podcast instead of listening to the flipping radio show. It's unbelievable. I think we're done. I'm done. I'm absolutely broken now. How much news can happen in the space of a single week? Once again, I find myself marvelling at Rachel Venables this week, who's managed to do every single job in our newsroom, pretty much, give or take. Of course, ably supported by splendid colleagues, but goodness me. And indeed, on it goes for who knows what happens next week. So to recap on what's happened this week, Boris Johnson kind of resigned, although I think I'll leave you with this grim thought. He is still hoping something will come up. Like a demonic Mr. Micawber, he is hoping something might happen that allows him to salvage status, which is, of course, all he's ever cared about, to salvage status from the wreckage of his own premiership. But an unprecedented number of Conservatives suddenly discovered a moral compass that I think had been going to a different school for the last 3 years, and they decided not only that they would get their previously unsuspected moral compass out of their pockets, but also consult it and decide that up with Johnson they could no longer put. Sajid Javid, who is to integrity what... I've run out of clever analogies. But for Sajid Javid to stand up in the House of Commons and claim he couldn't contemplate having his integrity impugned after working under Boris Johnson, not once but twice, was a moment of the purest comedy. Not for the first time. It's Armando Iannucci I feel sorry for, and all the satirists. And then, as if none of that were enough, up we come. In conclusion, as I bid you farewell for a fortnight, that Keir Starmer is not going to join Boris Johnson on the list of law-breaking coronavirus criminals. Thanks for keeping me company through the last hours, days, weeks, years. I'll be back, if there's a country to come back to, in approximately 2 weeks on Monday. Here's Sheila Fogarty.
That was funny. Are you ready for a holiday? I think that was
I
the sign.
might be.
That was the sign of a broadcaster ready for a holiday. I'm not going on holiday yet, but I was a bit similar yesterday with certain calls that were coming in as well. Thanks, James. Have a great break, 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 James.